Hey everybody, it's Carpo here, and I'd like to pose a question briefly. It's, is mysticism rational? And I guess it's difficult to even sum up what I'm trying to discuss here, but it's basically not a jab at any type of belief, but rather a question of whether it's just an integral part of who we are as a species. And so the question is mysticism rational? And further, does it even matter? Does it matter that we're rational beings? We seem to put a high value on knowing what's true and what's false, and that's understandable. If you make a mistake based on bad science and drink the wrong chemical, you're going to die. Understanding some basic components of life is essential. But irrational thinking gives us answers to, and I said irrational thinking, gives us answers to questions that we otherwise cannot find. We've all reached those same scientific dead ends where things cannot be proven or disproven, and usually when it pertains to beliefs, God, there are a million different viewpoints out there, but we can't dismiss people outright because they believe in something, nor can we dismiss people outright just because they don't have any beliefs. It's understandable why we seek answers. So, horoscopes, palm readers, they're just charlatans in my eyes. I really would like to believe that psychics can truly, accurately predict someone's future or give them a path to happiness. And if it works for a person, all I can say is that it is most likely a placebo effect. Now, for me to say that is, of course, it's just like talking about God. You can't prove or disprove. There's guaranteed to be, out of millions of psychics out there, there's going to be some right guesses. Humans tend to follow very similar paths in life. And there's well-known techniques like cold reading. We have these people who have even made entire network television shows out of it. Like the... God, what was his name? He's known as the biggest douche in the universe, according to South Park. I'm sure somebody will point it out. But the thing is, these people take advantage of people when they're at their weakest. And this is why I feel people have to speak up on it. It's not to take away people's hopes or, their dreams that there could be a God or could be somebody who could help them predict their future. But my belief is that knowledge of the future does not exist. And if it does, it doesn't exist in any accessible form. So to be clear, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that there's no way to know what's going to happen. I believe that time has some very strange attributes to it we don't understand. And many people discuss things in the sense of, oh, time doesn't exist and everything that's ever happened is all happening at the same time. That's all great and dandy. But we live on a timeline as humans. So being reasonable about that is, to try to guess, a different timeline, it really hasn't worked out for anyone so far. People are constantly predicting things that don't happen. So deciphering what's mystical is a subjective experience, or deciphering what it means to be spiritual, or a religious experience, or anything thereof. And, we've let go of a lot. Demons, we used to believe in, there's still the old crystal balls and the rolling of bones in many cultures where they use things like voodoo, which, there's some creepy attributes to many of these practices. There may be very well energy that is created by people with power in numbers or their will or intent. In fact, I'm convinced there is, but how can you know? In other words, there's no scientific way to say this is how you make a voodoo doll and you do this and this is exactly what will happen, right? It's kind of like, well, it works through some unseen force. Perhaps it doesn't, perhaps it doesn't. But it's not usable in any consistent way. And that's one of the, I guess, this is harder than I thought to express. We no longer believe in trolls, right? Or witches. Oh, there's a new kind of troll in town, but you know what I mean. The demons that live in the woods, and monsters, and even possessions are still questioned to this day. What is a possession? Perhaps a person does get taken over by some entity. We don't know. But think about this, a few hundred years ago, when people would have an epileptic seizure, they thought they were possessed by demons. I mean, this is how far we've come, and how medical advances have taught us that some of these conditions are not indeed caused by anything more than a genetic mishap, or, an exposure to something that we're allergic to that gives us some wart-looking boils, and we think it was like some plague from God. Humans always try to find an answer to their questions, and there aren't as many as people would like to believe. And so beliefs have an extremely positive side. They give people comfort in times of need. They help them to grieve for those they've lost. And there's another side of it, though, which it also gives you somebody to blame for your problems. Because almost every belief in a positive energy comes with a negative side along with it that says, well, if things aren't going well, then it must be this. It must be some evil force. And that's where we don't take accountability for our own actions, because we're individuals and we make decisions. But even a false sense of security is still security to people. And I can't blame anyone for wanting security in a world like this, right? But the promise of an eternal life, for example, in heaven, is something that helps us in this life, right? But at the same time, it can cause people to maybe view this life as less valuable than it really is. This time that we have here, this short window of opportunity to, but all that aside, I mean, on the question of God, when I use that term, of course, I don't mean a guy in the sky. God is extremely subjective. There is no authority on what God is. And that's because it's extremely personal to each individual. Whether it's a force that pervades everything, whether it's a conscious entity, whether it's just everything including us, there seems to be a larger picture, a larger force, but trying to explain that is where we fall flat. It's just like saying there may be connections to the future, but trying to put it down on paper is where we fall flat. And in the meantime, a lot of people really believe what they're teaching, what they're, people who believe they're channeling aliens, for example. But then there's a million, charlatans. People like Peter Popoff, or a lot of these, mega churches where these people just, multi-millionaires flying in jets, private jets and limos, and all the while saying, well, God's brought this bounty upon me. Hey, give to your last check. Give till it hurts, Nothing disgusts me more than evangelical preachers who ask for money. God doesn't need money. Get that right out of the way. But they also use tricks over the centuries. Things like levitation, where you find out that it was a trick of the camera, trick of the eye. There's a new sucker born every day, so you can't convince the population that they're being lied to when a whole new generation is coming up. But people assume that they're becoming more aware because the internet's helping them become more educated. But it actually seems to be having a reverse effect because we're so cornered by all these different ideas. We don't even know what to believe. And, like all these people, they'll never say, oh, you're not ready, like a psychic, or any of these people will always give you positive affirmations, right? Nobody wants to tell you, oh, you're going to be screwed and you're going to lose your love and everything's going to go wrong for you. Because people want hope, and that's understandable. So watching all of this around the world, how science has given us many new perspectives, but it hasn't answered the most crucial questions, it leaves people wondering to this day, with all our advancements in technology, should I take on a mystical type of life, That sounds stupid. Should I become spiritual? I really hate that term. But I've always dabbled in what I call spirituality. From the time I was a teenager, meditating with incense and whatnot, I've always been into that. But I don't take it seriously, like wearing robes and saying, oh, namaste, everything's got to be peaceful and no bad vibes, bro. Because the reality is that's not the way the world is. I try to live the way the world is, and we live in the brave new world, which is constantly changing. So how do we want to live in this world is the question I'm posing. New discoveries always have detractors. Like, there's a fear of knowledge, and a fear of discoveries. Whether it was people fearing a train when the first train came to be and thinking that if we traveled too fast, meat would blow off our bones or something. We don't understand new technology, so we fear it. And now we're starting to understand technology, but we don't understand ourselves instead. We're in complete denial of many people are in denial of evolution, for example. Even though you can clearly see that, dogs have been consistently evolving as we bred them, it's no different from any other species. The world is always changing, but we can't grasp the depth of time in billions of years. So it's much easier to sometimes believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old. It's a more understandable, graspable concept. But in the back of the mind, a person's often saying, I know that's probably not true, but it gives me comfort. And like I said, once again, I don't blame them. If we don't see that we're all intertwined and that we have to respect each other, then we're going to destroy ourselves before too long. So me bringing up beliefs isn't to laugh or point. It's to say they also cause wars and division. And they're used as an excuse for people to kill one another. It's not the fault of the belief. It's the fault of humans and their attachment to think that they're righteous. It's a slippery slope. But one asks the question, is that the natural order of things? You start to wonder, is that what nature wants? I just can't answer that question. But anyway, I kids calling me, so I better finish this up. I prefer to listen to nature and feel what's right. We cannot depend on only our intuition, okay? Many of these feelings that we have, things are just felt and not really explainable. This is why, even though I'm a rational person that understands a lot of our old beliefs are nonsense, I still hang on to the fact that I think that there's a greater force, an awareness in the universe that may not cater to each individual the way we want it to, but nonetheless exists. I don't see how creation could not have a deeper force. It's, to me, absurd to think that humans are just some random evolving being. That still doesn't solve the bigger problem of why we evolve the way we do. Why are we so complex? What's about complexity? Why not stay cells? Why not be very simple organisms? I don't know. And I've talked to people who are, who study evolution, evolutionary biologists who say, well, we just don't know. Things just become more complex to fit in their environment, or, random mutation. And you start to go, random mutation got to where we are here. I'll just put that on the shelf and leave that there for now. Maybe mutation not so random, but we don't know. And that's the beauty. People are afraid to even talk about that because if you're an atheist, you don't dare say that there might be a blueprint behind it. But if you're religious, you don't dare question what you are told, your specific doctrine and dogma. And dogma is what holds us back. So we have to find a balance between what we know, or what we think we know, and what we need or desire. So we have these inner needs that have to be filled, and so we have beliefs to fill those needs. We build a picture of the world in our minds. We can't be faulted for that. Even the most, what they would call a rational scientist, they have built their own structure of what they believe. And many of them are specific to their own disciplines. So, an evolutionary biologist isn't probably going to know much about fabrics and molecules. And a cellular biologist probably won't know much about, the geology. There are a million different doctrines that come together. And I guess as a species, we kind of have to trust one another. That's the point. Because we don't know all the details. We trust our teacher knows what they're talking about. We try to trust that, the people that we hire do a good job. Or if we hire a carpenter, they've done work before. Or your doctor isn't just some, kid off the street who just wanted to work on people. The one, I guess, final point to make here, a few points, but there is no secret chant or state of mind that is permanent where you've achieved some enlightenment that endures. I really stand by that. If there are people out there who have achieved that state permanently, they're not likely to respond because they're probably not on YouTube. if you're truly at this, like, this state of mind where you never have problems, life would be absurd, right? So we're always going to have controversy. I think enlightenment is more of a process, how you deal with things, how you cope, how you transmute negative things in your life into a positive experience to learn from. So we're always in flux, ever changing, ever growing, right? So we have to be kind to each other, not just because a book tells us to. More like these books are reflecting what we've always known. Religion didn't tell us how to behave, in other words. Spirituality didn't tell us how to care about one another or revere nature. These all are byproducts of what we all as a collective have already known, right? That there's more to this. We don't know how much more or why, and why our short window here we think we're so important. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. But cooperation is a major benefit, and that's why humans tend to stick to groups. Cooperation has been the greatest benefit in mankind, which has helped us evolve. Without it, we would get nothing done. That includes the authority subject and understanding and trusting others know what they're talking about, to an extent. And there are many religions out there, thousands of languages, and probably as many belief systems. But there's only one science worldwide, many disciplines which maybe have slightly different operating procedures, but a basic inquisitive nature of saying, this is what we see, let's do a test and make a theory. Now, if you think about what science really is, it's a religion, but not in a bad way. It's a spiritual practice. It is. It's just a way of understanding the world by looking at something, guessing, I wonder if this will happen, and then doing a test to see how that works out. Yet it is one of the most hated and ridiculed practices by so many people. They just constantly, science is the enemy, science is evil. I know why. We all know why. It's because it sometimes doesn't tell us what we want to hear. And it's imperfect and never changing, which is something religion isn't, because it stagnates. You remain stuck on an old belief, and even if you want to change it, you can't, because that puts into question the entirety of it. So, the people like Carl Sagan, for example, or Isaac Asimov, these deep thinkers and philosophers and people who study the universe and people, kind of, when they would speak, especially back in their time, decades in past, things are changing now, but the loneliness of speaking the truth, I always really admired those people for sticking their necks out. For them to have a debate with, say, a creationist, and to take the time to try and explain why they think the way they think, even though they know they're probably just going to be told they're wrong no matter what they say. And then they become jaded at all the ignorance and the ignorant people that they've faced, right? And I'm making a point here. This is why a lot of people look at science as elitism. It's because a lot of people who are deeply into their scientific field have been questioned by people with the Dunning-Kruger effect, the layman attitude of, well, you don't know what you're talking about. So therefore, this guy on YouTube said this. I think that this is true. And the guy is kind of like a facepalm, a metaphoric facepalm to the whole community. People that spend their whole life studying something and then they're questioned by somebody who says, this conflicts with my religion. And that becomes hard. Right now, we're destroying our own planet through ignorance and competition, and often acting as if it's ours to waste. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But in the end, we're going to find out the hard way that we work together or we die together. And as grim as that may sound, it's only a call for respect between one another, and that includes the original statement, or question rather, which is, is mysticism a rational way to think? Thinking as a spiritual person or a religious person, any type of belief that cannot be proven. And I would say, yes, it's absolutely justified and viable in today's world, in any time through history. The only thing that we have to remember is, if it puts you into a group where you think others are wrong and their belief systems are wrong, then you're falling into dogma. And I think as long as we stay away from that, we're just fine to believe that we're all connected. I don't see how we couldn't. Those are my thoughts for the day. I'll talk to y'all next time. Be well, my friends. Give somebody a hug and a thumbs up and a props and tell them you love them and all that stuff.